First of all, I just want to say I'm really grateful and also thankful to be here with you all today. I say that because it's so critical and important what our young people know. We talk about justice and we talk about injustice. And no different than all of you here, you know, us older people all went through those stages as well, you know, at a different generational time. I'm going to be 67 years old. And I would say I look at my life as sort of like the last chapter of my life. And what am I going to leave behind? What am I going to do? But it really starts back with who you are. To even understand what justice or injustice is, and even to make a really good, important decision what you make in life, is to know who you are first. And that's really critical. And I say that because, again, like I tell people in the country and everywhere I speak, except to Congress, I don't say to Congress, but to all the people I say, I apologize if I offend you with what I'm going to say, because it's the truth that I'm telling you. Now, with Congress, I tell them a little different. You know this already. You know it already. Why are you doing this? So it's a whole different approach when we talk to Congress. Because it's sad, because in Congress, our government, it has all the information it needs. From the very beginning to where we are right now and where we will go to the future. Identity. You have to know who you are. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but one of the things for me about injustice is really to learn this country and to really learn who we are. Because if you look at the economic engine of this country and the social well-being of who we are as people of this country, we're really not doing a good job. Period. And I tell Congress that you have all these feasibility studies, you have all these studies. Why don't you ever make the right decision? So we continue. I went to Washington when I was 22 years old. I'm 67 now. So I'm like, how come nothing hasn't changed? How come it's getting worse? And how come we're not listening to statistics? How come we're not listening to what we were like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago? Why are we giving less hope to our children? Why is there going to only be a minimum stuff left for you and for your children and then after them? So it's a lot of important questions that you have to ask yourself. In order to ask yourself that, is I have to know myself before I even go out and start doing things. So for me, my great-grandfather and my grandfather walked in as prisoners of war in San Carlos. I don't know how many of you know about Arizona, but going southeast, there's a place called the San Carlos Apache Reservation. That was known as the Hellhole 40, where they brought all the Apaches as prisoners of war. Well, my grandfather, great-grandfather, grandfather walked in. So here comes my mom and dad. They're born in the 1920s, 1921, 1922. And from there, it changed into a concentration camp. So after the 1930s, anybody born after that is firstborn reservation. So I'm born in the 1950s, so I'm firstborn reservation. So like for us, it just happened. It's just right here. And then we talk about assimilation. We talk about programming people. We talk about taking away your culture. We talk about taking away your religion. They talk about taking away your land base, who you are. So it's more or less like shoving people into a box, putting people in a box. Then they're going to start to train you who and what they want you to be. And so from there, when I was growing up, I was wondering why my dad, my grandfather, my uncles were always intoxicated. But I could always hear my mother on this side saying, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That's what they want you to do. That's what they want you to do. But nothing more than that. Only a lot of the past. So what really hit me, like when I was in junior high, was when I went to the town of Globe, Miami, and played basketball, of course, you know, sports that took us off the reservation. And I made some friends. And these white friends of mine were asking me questions like, how does it feel to live on the reservation? How does it feel to leave? How does it feel? All these questions came up that like blew me away. Like I thought we were all the same. Then brought me back home to start asking those questions. How come their lives are different than ours? What's up? So it was really hard for my mother to explain because her born in the 1920s, they didn't get very much. So when I say that, what I mean is that we're still under military control. And when the Native people finally got self-determination was back in the early 70s, 1970s under Nixon. Nixon gave the tribe self-determination, meaning that he gave us a voice. We didn't have a voice before. Because since that time, from the 1974 down, we were controlled from what you guys probably familiar with is the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. It was the War Department that became the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so all the way from 1974, my mother had to tell them when we were leaving and when we would be back. And that's, as a young boy growing up, that was the conditions I lived under. That's only less than an hour and 45 minutes from here, where all this was happening. But I remember the stories my mother used to tell me about running away from these schools that they were taking our children. And she was one of them, and she would have to hide in the hills and not get picked. But she did. One time got picked up from the military and was brought here to Phoenix Indian School, but then at the age of 8 years old, ran all the way back to San Carlos. But when she had children, I'm the youngest of 7. When she had children, my 2 oldest sisters, who graduated in the late 60s, they still had the relocation program. And so when you graduated from high school, you were mandated to go. And that's where a lot of Indian kids went to Los Angeles, the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, Chicago. You hear of all these places, but that's where they were sent to be more assimilated and really sever their ties with who they are, what they were supposed to be. But I always remember in 1968, my brother graduated. And he had like 2 parties. One was a graduation party, and the other one was that he could finally stay home and choose a school in Arizona. So colleges here were not accepting Native kids, not until then. Because then that's when the financial part came in, that schools can make money off Native kids. And that's where the schools began to open up their educational system to us. That was in 1968. So in the town of Globe, you still had signs that said dogs, cats, you're not allowed, Indian people not allowed. So a lot of our people were not able to eat in the restaurants in Globe. So they had to order on the side of the restaurant to get their food. And that's why when you find those people, like my mother's no longer here. She passed when she was 88 years old, about 10 years ago. So she would have been 98 if she was still alive. But a lot of those people remember those days and they don't go to the restaurants. And that's why you find a lot of Native people parking on the side, older people parking on the side of the road and they're eating because they were never walking. But the younger generation forgot about all of that. The younger generation doesn't really remember that, of what the people went through in the transition. So here I come. Found out that we were exiled out of the places that we were born into. We're exiled out of our religious places that are holy and sacred to us. We're removed so that our identity would be totally lost and assimilated and forever forgotten. So I don't know about you, but for me, that was like, what? You know, is this why we have the kind of reservation that we have? And then when I got a little bit older, even to learn more that the reservation don't even belong to us. So the assumption in America is that the Native people own reservations. Now, I can't speak for all of them. There's like over 500 different tribes. But here in Arizona, speaking about San Carlos, we're off what we call the President Executive Order. The President of the United States created the San Carlos Apache Reservation. So what that means is that we didn't go through the House, it was never approved, and it was never approved in the Senate. So there's really no legislative bill, strong bill that protects us. It's the president. And that's why so many tribes are right now, they're really afraid of Trump. Because by the stroke of his signature, another big chunk of the reservation can be taken. But whatever he decides to change, he can do it. That's not on solid ground. And that's what our people live in today. I don't know how much research you've done, but we can't even get loans from the banks. The only loans that we can get from the bank is anything with wheels. That if you can't pay, and it's taken from you, they can roll it out. But any kind of solid foundation, they will not fund because the land belongs to the federal government. So the argument is that if you want San Carlos or these native places to prosper, then the United States, that's your responsibility. That's you, not us. We're not going to build anything in there permanent. So when you look at the whole system, we're put in a position to not make it. We're put in a position to not compete. And that's this country, that's the state of Arizona right now that we live in. So for me, I'm a Chiricahua Apache. And if you know about the Chiricahuas, I come from the band of Geronimo. And all the Chiricahuas were killed, and what was left was exiled out of Arizona. But my great-grandfather, talking about my great-grandfather and my grandfather, he was caught by the United States a month after they shipped out Geronimo. That's why I'm in Arizona. If he would have been caught at the same time, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'll probably be in Oklahoma, where they all settled. But anyway, I'm here. So after a month, they decided, okay, no, we're going to keep him here. We're going to keep him as prisoner of war in San Carlos. So in San Carlos, we have 15 different bands of Apaches. It was a boiling pot. So I am not the majority in San Carlos, my people. We know each other from the different dialects we have. We talk with a Z or a J. So that's how we know each other when we're talking to each other in San Carlos. So I'm with a Z. Z. That's Chiricahuas. That's the Western Apaches. And so even there we have a problem because we're like a little diverse from each other and we control different areas of Arizona, New Mexico, and northern part of Arizona. But now we're all brought as prisoners of war. Now we're in this confinement, we have to live together. Now the United States gives us a tribal government, but controlled by the United States, like I said. They still own the government. And so all this bothered me. But the most important thing that bothered me was the children. Who are they going to be? What are they going to do? Where do they fit? And how do they fit? When I see all this land eaten up like crazy, and the people suffer right in the middle, something's happening. This is wrong. This is that word where it comes in, the injustice. So in every category of the injustice, it affected us. From our religion, social, economic development, all these things that we learn about, we all are affected by it. So what do we have left? What do we really have left? Because when I became the chairman of the tribe, a month into my leadership, the United States gave me an invitation to come to Washington. So I went to Washington, had all my stuff ready, talk about the tribe, talk about the people, talk about healthcare, education, all this stuff. I get there, and they take me to the first place they take me to is the Pentagon. So I meet these admirals and all these people, and they talk to me all about war. Then they take me to the Supreme Court, and they showed me all the laws, well, the important laws that apply to us, and some to this country. Okay? Then they take me to Congress, they have me sit up there, and I watch all the action going on the floor. Then from there, they take me to the White House. Before you know it, I was on a plane home. And I always remember, coming home, it was dark, and saying to myself, they didn't even give me a chance to talk about my people and all the hardships and all the things that are happening. Nothing. So, as a leader, just being embarrassed, but not totally knowing why, was when I went over to my mother about 2 weeks later, And she says to me in Apache, I heard you went to Washington. What happened? So I told her. But I'll never forget her smile. I'll never forget her smile. Something that bothered me, she found something positive from it. So she said, and just so excited, here's this lady telling me, sit down, sit down, sit down. She goes, I'm gonna talk to you. She goes, we have always thought the white people were the worst thing on the earth because of what they have done and what they continue to do. Look how we live. Because the big question we all have is, what did we do? What did we ever do to them to receive all of this? Now, if you put yourself in my shoes and you go down to San Carlos and you see where we live, then you go back to where we originated from, you would say, hey, it's like upside down. So Geronimo, all he did was wanted to go home. When they brought him to Household 40, the desert place, and he said, you're giving me this and you're taking me away from that? So you ever been down to the Chiricahuas in Portal, and I think some of you guys may be familiar with Sedona. It's the same thing. Beautiful, beautiful. An abundance of food, abundance of things, and our religion of where it actually started from. All he wanted to do was go home. But then all the propaganda started. The Apaches are out to kill you. The Apaches are going to do this, they're going to do that, And a huge war started again. But this time they exiled him out of there. So here I am looking at my mother, and she says to me, do you know what the United States just did? This is great because now, she says, I don't hate the white people like I did. She goes, because it's not them. She goes, they showed you their power, military power. They showed you that they were controlling the Supreme Court, the court with the laws of the land. Then they showed you how they congregate and they talk. And then they show you the man who leads the whole thing. She goes, son, there's one thing they didn't show you that they don't have in that power that they have in Washington is the compassion, the heart of the people. What they did was they showed you their weakness. So you know what that means? She goes, that means that when we were walking the way we're supposed to be as Indian people, and all this came and happened, it scared us, it spooked us. Then we turned to rebut it. Where we have to go now is back to who we are. Because if we go back to who we are, that is the power and the strength of what's important in everybody's life. So they tricked us to get away from this. So she said, now your work is to go find these people and make it happen. So today we use the word injustice and justice. But really, it's really how we behave and what decisions we're going to make and what kind of moral decisions we're going to make. And to think not only to the future, but think to the past, because the past helps build the future. Because everything that you can look back, even in your personal life, you can look back and evaluate where some of the mistakes you made. So when you turn this way, you can make the right decision. And then there's the real teaching. When you're all born, your parents, grandparents, mine, everybody's, we don't come with instructions. There's no instructions to tell you how to act when you're 5, 10, 15, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and so on. There's no instructions. But what we have is examples. So what we say is, look at the people ahead of you. Which one do you want to be? How do you want to be? Because in the people ahead of you, they're going to make mistakes and then they're going to make good decisions. So you cannot say that you have no examples. You have examples because you have that power of making a choice. Do I go to bed early tonight so I have a good day tomorrow? Or do I go to bed late and I'm going to be dragging tomorrow? I mean, even those kind of decisions we have to make. And that's the thing of the beauty of the whole thing is that you can make these right decisions. In religion, everybody points. It's bad over there, it's evil, it's here, oh look, it's this picture, oh look. For us, again, going back to us, we create evil. We create. So what we see happening in the world and what has been happening is created by us. We can't blame anybody else. Because what we say is that there's a good vehicle and a bad vehicle when we explain it to the younger people, but there's no driver. You're going to drive that vehicle. Which one are you going to drive today? Which one are you mostly going to drive? If you look at our decisions that we make in this country, nobody's standing up to say this is wrong. Or maybe they need more people to stand up. So when we see all these atrocities that are happening, we're a part of that. We're a part of it. Like it or not, we're a part of it. And so when I was growing up, our issue not only is an Apache issue, our issue became a Native issue. Then from the Native issue, and I'm talking about Arizona, then it became an Arizona issue. Then from Arizona, it jumped into the country. And then from the country, it went worldwide. This Oak Flat fight that I'm here, that brought me here to be with you today, is a national fight. But why are we getting the publicities that we should get? Why are we getting it? Then you go into the whole economic engine of this country. It's like saying, my brother had a good example. He said to his boy, don't drink, because if your friends force you to drink, then they have you. They'll always break you down. Be careful. That was the warning of my brother to his son. So his son didn't really believe his father, but when that day happened, man, those boys held it on him. Oh, you drink. Before you know it, the whole thing went out everywhere. He drank, and he's not that person that everybody thought he was. So that's the same example about what we do in life. If we touch it, we're dirty. Geronimo, the military guys were playing baseball, throwing the ball outside the base, and the ball rolled to this young Apache boy. And Geronimo told him, don't touch it. Because if you touch it, it's going to change you forever. So we use that example because we've touched a lot of things that are destroying all of us. So we're not perfect either because we touched it. And now we have this fight where we have to understand what does it mean and what does it do and where are we going to go. And I say that because it fits in every category of decisions you guys are going to make as you move forward. I was in Yale speaking, and after the class, one of the girls got up to me and said, Mr. Nosie, I have a problem. She says, I'm getting my degree is in the environment. And from understanding what you said today, she says, I'm a lot more worried. She says, because the corporations are after me. They want me to work for them. I don't know what to do. And I told her, I said, it's like what we say back home. The decision is solely yours for what you're going to decide to do. But the important thing is to learn what you're doing before you do it. And so I'm going to give you some examples. I sit up at Oak Flats, I stay there, and I get visits from, again, no offense to anybody, I get visits from people from Scottsdale. From Scottsdale, Arizona, I get a lot of people coming. And they're coming because they see Facebook, they see all this stuff that we're doing. And once we get beyond the injustice of the laws of the environment and the religion, then they ask me, I want to be happy like you. And I was like, well, are you from Scottsdale? They go, yeah, but I want to be, we don't have what you have. I said, what do you mean by that? Yes, we have money, we have all these things, but we're not happy. So then we end up going further into the discussion. What it comes down to is that they say themselves, they marry for financial reasons. And they're not happy. They have all the money they have all the land, they have all the assets, but they're not happy. How can we fix that? And I tell them, don't do that to your children. Don't do that to your children. Because everything we learn here that doesn't make us happy, we make sure we teach our children different. And so I turned to this young lady and I said, what I'm trying to say to you is that you really have to study what you're going into. Because you do have corporations here, and then you do have other organizations here, and they kind of fight each other about you when it comes to a feasibility study of what's critical. Then you have the government, which also outlines the importance about the land base. So if you can go to those two and learn, then you can decide. I can't tell you to work for the corporation. Your morals, your integrity has to make that decision. Where are you going to go and work? I said, because the end result is that you want to be happy. You want to be happy. And if you're not happy, then you're never going to receive that blessed gift that we talked about. And the reason I bring that up again is because of where we are right now. And this is kind of where I want to shift a little bit. I just kind of want you to know who I am, things that I worry about, why I'm here to talk to all of you, why I'm across the country talking to so many faith groups, churches, organizations, all these movers across the country, and even, having face-to-face talks with corporations who are destroying the earth, and also with Congress and those people. So I speak to everybody. But I can't speak to them if I don't know who I am. So, going on the road, you gotta know who you're talking to, right? You just can't go talk to people. You gotta know. So it took me, before I forget, that's my wife right there, Teresa. So anyway, I just want to bring her up because we went to Europe several times. And the reason why I went to Europe was to learn about the people from Europe who came here. Because I can't deal with the people here because they have an identity. I had to go to Europe to learn the white people here. And then from there, it took me to stay in the East Coast to learn about the people there before I even talked. Because what I was hunting for was the word indigenous. So I told a crowd of, and Apache sounds better in now. Now it means white people. So when I say now, it means white people. It's people, the white complected people. So in talking to the Nas, I went to Europe and I said, no, take me to the Italians, take me to the French, take me to the Germans. I went to like 5 different places and said, take me to them, but don't take me to the rich ones. Don't take me to all the ones that are running all these organizations. Take me to the ones that are still in the mountains, and the farms, and the fields. They understood a lot of things I was saying. It was like talking to another tribe. And the things that they shared with me, and then they took me to the Alps, that there's this ancient petroglyph that you find only in the high peaks, and in the Alps, the same petroglyph is there. So the ceremonial things that they did versus what we did, 75% was similar. And then they ate from the earth. It was incredible. So when I came back to the East Coast and I had all these non people I was going to talk to, I told them, I said, I'm going to say to you, do you know you're indigenous? Do you know you are indigenous? That's the best finding that we could ever come across, that everybody's indigenous. But why are we acting on it? Why? How come we're not embracing it? Well, let's come to the East Coast. Again, I do a lot of speaking in the East Coast. And here I am with a group of white men. The organizer is worried, and she says to me, there's about 20 white men want to speak to you. I don't know, they seem really intense. She said, what do you want to do? Take you out the back door? I said, no. I said, I want to hear what they have to say to me. I said, they hit me. I said, it's okay. I said, I just want to hear what they have to say. So I go in the room, and all these white men, one speaker says to me, because they're from a church group, he says to me, Mr. Nosie, we lost you when you started to talk about ancestors. Then I said, well, I try to use the English definition as best as I can about what ancestors are. And he goes, no. He goes, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we can't go as far as back as you can. We cannot go, listen to this. We cannot go back as far as you can. Now, I'm bringing you something that you may not have ever had the opportunity to hear. This is really deep stuff. What they said to me was, when they came to America, like your people, they said, like your people, we were stripped of our identity too. We were told we couldn't be this or couldn't do that. If we're going to be Americans, we had to let go of everything that we were. And then to top it off, I didn't know that grandparents and parents brought their kids to America and dropped them off and left back to Europe. Totally losing their identity and being raised in a system that tells them something different. And you know, I felt more for the people of the country than my own people. Because my own people, we have our identity. We are rooted. But all these people who came, we're not rooted. So it gave this economic engine that we have that is created from colonization, capitalism. It created a new generation of people. That's why we say America has no solid foundation. It's an illusion. We live in an illusion. And that's why you guys are listening. Thank you. For those of you who may not be listening, I hope you have some good teaching somewhere. But what I'm trying to say to you is that this is so critical in this moment, in this time. If you don't develop this, everything's going chaos. I'm sorry, but what was had here in the early days of this country no longer exists because of our government not being true to information of what's going to occur. Now, I don't know how many are from Arizona, or I don't know who's going to live in Arizona, but the United States already made a decision to make Arizona, the southern part of Arizona, a wasteland. They have to have a place where they're going to deposit waste. The president has already told people to move out of Arizona. People in the South are selling to move. Now, I was in Montana, where in this town, they found out I was there, they called me to their council meeting. And this is what they asked me. Not in their council meeting, before their council meeting, they took me into the executive session. And they asked me, Mr. Nosie, Native people are against pipes. So we're just wondering that if we were to do a pipeline, would you guys be against it? I'm like, wait. What kind of pipeline are you talking about? Well, there was that fight in Standing Rock where everybody fought. That was oil, gas lines there. That was that. But for us, we want to run, we're looking and discussing about running pipelines with water to Arizona. I said, what? Well, we don't want the Arizona people moving out. We have to start doing these projections. That's already the top. Already. How do we keep people from not migrating up? And if you follow the things America is doing, Arizona's going to become a wasteland. Old Flats. John McCain. One of the big reasons why he was gung-ho about Oak Flats, because it's supposed to be a cavity. They take all the copper ore, they're going to take it all out. So what they sold to John McCain was the fact that they can store nuclear waste there. But what happened was they found uranium. You cannot store nuclear waste with active uranium. So that whole deal was shut down. But in the meantime, 2 foreign mining companies went forward. We've been fighting them since 1998. Officially, they went after it in 2002. Now we're what, 25? But they initially went after getting exemptions from the federal government from all laws. Every law you can imagine was exempt for them. So you're talking about billions of water being contaminated. Billions of water. So when they got this exemption in 2014, they didn't have to tell the state of Arizona anything. They didn't have to tell you nothing. Because they were exempt. The United States Congress gave them an exemption from all federal laws. This is the fight that we're in right now at Oak Flats. It's going to affect Phoenix, Tucson. It's going to affect the state of Arizona, all the way down to Yuma. Because now Yuma's joining the fight because the deep water comes out of Yuma. And all that's going to be contaminated. Then you have the tailings that's going to hit the Gila River, and it's going to come down here into the Phoenix area, running along, what's that mountain? South Mountain. And then you have the tailings that are going to go on the other side of South Mountain. Not tailings, what's it called? The waste, the slur. So the slur is going to be piped down to the other side of the mountain. It's all coming here. You talk about injustice, man, that's not just for us, it's everybody here. When we have these kind of things happening in our own government, where it's not about the people anymore, it's about how this country was first formed and how they will bleed for that, than to really care about you or anyone else. So what I've learned through this whole thing was that it's not just an attack on Indian people, it's an attack on every one of us. That's why what you learn is so important. I tell my kids, I have, how many kids do we have graduated out of ASU now? Two, yeah. So I have 2 that graduated out of ASU, and I have a little boy, grandson, that's taken
kindergarten ASU.
at ASU online. So ASU. So anyway, I tell them, I say, look, you're gonna have to be making these critical decisions now, because you have to look at reality. And I said, as your dad, as your grandfather, I said, for me, again, no offense to anybody, I said, I don't care, Republican or Democrat, both have failed. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. These two have done the same thing. And then when they ask me about Trump, and they get really, people get really funny when I say it, but I said with Trump, we're blessed with him. And everyone's like, wow. And I said, what I'm trying to say is that what he's doing is what everybody has already done. The only difference is that he's brought it to the forefront. we are witnessing what America has always been. So in our belief, we say that when this country cries, it's now time to heal. It's now time for our children to do the right thing. You can talk to the geologists. They tell you it's not enough. There's hardly anything really left for sustainability for the next 100 years. They tell you that the earth has already shifted. All that we're witnessing right now is the new shift of the earth. All these things that are occurring. And then they're talking about how parts of the land in different states are going to drop. How water is going to come, how now water, they're clear cutting forests, they're burning all these places so more water can get into the tributaries so it can feed the cities. So we're suffering up there because all these clear cutting, all these overburn so that the waters can get to the lakes and can feed the cities. But you know what? When all of that up there disappears, there's nothing left. And that's what confuses us, because what is real is what they're killing. Everything that can sustain our future children are being destroyed right now, everywhere. Now, when we come back to one of the laws, the 1872 mining law. Right now, I'm all over the country talking to so many people around this country. And it blows me away that nobody really knows about the 1872 law that still exists. That is what's destroying our land. That's what is destroying our aquifers. That is what's creating climate changes. Because the 1872 law is the most dangerous law that exists. And what people are finding out now is that it has affected their states. Contamination. You can go places where you can't even touch the water. They tell me you can't touch it, you can't swim there. This is in America. Because corporations had their way to contaminate so many places and so many things that people embrace it as a norm. So I don't know how many of you guys have been to Globe Miami or through Superior to Globe Miami. So raise your hand, anybody been to that area? Okay. So you guys understand the tailings, right? You see the tailings? So they put all the waste on the top. And get a load of this, the mining companies put the American flag on top of the waste, and everybody during the 4th of July cooks their hamburgers and hot dogs, and they're looking at the tailings and they say the resolutions to the flag on top of the tailings. So I had people who come from all over the country and could not believe people were celebrating the American flag on top of tailings. And they talk about propaganda, talk about, like programming. But in my travels, I come back to the reservation, and this is what I tell my people. I said, I thought different. And I'm glad I learned. I'm glad I went out there and listened. I'm glad I had this experience. I said, because I thought us Native people had it worse than all these people who live here. I said, I come to find out that's not true. I said, I come to find out that we equally live back. I said, it's called reservations for us, but for them, it's called towns and cities. That's what it's called. I said, their voices are more taken than us. Because we have a right to argue for the land. We have the right to argue. We have the right to file in the federal court, in the Supreme Court. We have the right. There's a big fight between us and the United States on that level. But in all this injustice, no white people can help us. No black people can help us. No Asian people can help us. Anybody else that came to America can't help us. If you research and you look at all these critical laws, how come there's none of the people that call themselves Americans in those lawsuits? In these major fights to save this world, how come they're not in there? Well, I'm going to tell you what. So, I don't know if you're familiar with, they call, briefly, in short, they call it EIS, the environmental impact. So anything you do, building a home, transfer of land, all this stuff, you need that study. See, that's what resolution proper got exempt from. But anyway, so what John McCain said in the bill, he said, regardless of the environmental impact study, the land will transfer anyway. So in other words, he said, go through the whole process, but it don't mean nothing. Land is going to transfer anyway. And so what that bill did was it eliminated our history, our culture, and now, and everything else that has to do with the environment was eliminated. But the one thing that we are fighting for is our religion for that place, because it wasn't in there. But when we turn to all the people for help, because supposedly the United States is the place that has the right for religion, and yet we're talking about the oldest religion of this country that's going to be totally annihilated and wiped away from this 2014 legislative bill that John McCain did. We said we will do an EIS statement anyway, just to have it in there. Now, this is why I really want you guys to listen. Please listen to this part, because this is you. So I met a white lady my age who grew up in the town of Superior, and her father was a preacher. And they went up to Oak Flats, and that's where she was raised. But when I came, she already knew I was coming. She already dreamed. She already sees. So I created a relationship with her based on us being exiled and sneaking back now and then, but getting what she knew. So I told her, I said, you're talking to the angels. You're talking to the deities. And I said to her, can you please do me a favor? I'm coming back. I have a letter that went to Washington, D.C., the president and Congress. And what I said was, I'm vacating the reservation and I'm going back home for your negligence. So that's what I gave in Washington. And then when I came back, I went back to Oak Flats to live. But in the meantime, like I said, I met her and I asked her, I said, can you pray for me? And she says, sure. So as I stood there, she started praying. The one old oak tree started moving. So I looked around, I didn't see any other trees moving except that one. And this is a white lady. She's praying. Trees moving. So when she was done, she walked over to me and I said to her, I said, you see the tree move? Then she goes, oh yeah, that does it all the time when I pray. And I said, wow. Thank you for praying. So when we were doing the EIS, all the Apaches, over 400 Apaches were doing all this statements. I asked her, can you write one? And she goes, are you sure? Me? I said, yeah. Can you write one? Yeah, of course. But I thought they don't take statements from white people. I said, man, I said, you're a person, you're a creation of God. Why are you so loyal to that? You should be loyal to the greatest gift God gave the world. So she did her statement, and it was submitted with all of us. So a week later, I got back the whole paper from the U.S. Forest Service. And so going through it, first time, second time, third time, I was like, okay. I went through the first part because I have all the litigation stuff, all the policies and everything in front. Then as long as I have a little more time, I'm going to go through the statements. So as I start going through the statements, something was missing. So, all the Forest Service, of course, we're litigating with the United States. So I had to talk to their attorney as well as with their director. So I put the EIS statements that thick in front of them. And I said, you probably know why I'm here. And they said, yeah, we know. I mean, the conversation was really, really short. And I said, there's something missing. And they said, yeah, we know. Just like that, just straight. Man, we're supposed to do a film. You get to see how they act. But anyway, I said, why is it missing? And the response from the United States, and please listen to this. she's a white lady. I said, why is it missing? She's a white lady. I know she's a white lady. Why is it missing? Well, the only one that can claim a religious happening between the earth and the creation is Native people. I said, whoa, wait a minute. Can you say that again? Well, if they want to touch the earth and feel anything religious, they can go back to the other side. And real quick, I jumped off my chair and I went to the door and I said, do all the white people know that? Do all the people of this country who call this home know what you guys are saying? Wow. Now I know. We are a corporate country. Because when these people came, you were satisfied with them holding the Bible, but you were not satisfied and you were never going to let them connect to the earth. For Indian people, I said, we don't think about that. Because anybody can have a discussion with God. Anybody has a rightful place. Wow. That means everybody who came across this government does not recognize you in your religious connection. Now, I don't know about you. That's wrong. Because we all have responsibility to Mother Earth. So when we don't have an identity, when we lose that identity, we lose that important concept of why we're here. In the federal government, on minerals, water is not even on the list. For the United States to make important decisions on water, it's not even on the list. And yet, 70% of us is water. Now, here's an argument from the federal courts. Tell us, what is the immediate harm? Tell us. On this issue with the transfer of the mind, what is the immediate harm? And we tell them, well, two important things. The religion that ties to the earth and water. Well, how's water? 70% of you is water. And everything that lives above the earth is 70% water. And yet, when you look at geologists, 41% of our water is contaminated. So should our leaders and people say, wait a minute, above the earth, 71% in all phase of life needs water. And yet we're destroying 41% and contaminating that water. And yet the minds are coming in and saying, well, we're going to refilter it and make it better than what it was. I mean, I'm like, come on, people. Once that whole water is destroyed, there's nothing left except people that are going to be not people, not what we are created to be. And so when you look at injustice and justice, for me, and I can only speak for me, I went through the political system. There was a bill called the Save Oak Flat Bill. It made it arguing in 2002, 2010, 2011, it finally made it for a hearing in the House. We're all excited because all these environmental damages we're talking about and all this religious injustice are going on was finally going to be heard. But when our Democratic Party went to Nancy Pelosi and said, if you continue to hear this, the Democrats are going to get a hit and we won't be reelected. So that system, the House pulled it. So am I going to have trust in the government? Because it did its dual process to get there, and yet it is pulled. The president, both presidents are dig. Challenge everybody else in the world, but don't care about what's going on in the geologist report. It's about the wealth. The stronghold has hit a nerve with the United States because now we're talking about the wealth of this country and old money and where it came from. So it reopened doors how America was founded and how it was created financially. And that's why our case fears what will happen if it goes forward. Then we go to the federal district courts. We went here in Phoenix. So what happened on that first one was that they pulled, well, the EIS was moving, environmental impact study, which needed its due process so that they could transfer the land. But when we filed, the government pulled it quick because it's inconsistent. It's really bad. They didn't want the public to know it, so they pulled it. So our judge here at the district court said, well, there's no immediate harm. I'm not going to rule an injunction. So this is where I'm going to stay. It went to the Ninth Circuit Court. The Ninth Circuit Court, 3 federal judges heard it. One supported the mines, one supported the religion. The third one said, well, there's no immediate harm because the EIS was pulled. So I'm just going to not move for the stronghold. So we notified the Ninth Circuit Court. We're now on our way to the Supreme Court. But they pulled us back. I didn't go back and ask for a rehearing. They pulled us back. That's like, I was told that was like 0.5 that's ever done. They pulled us back. And when they pulled us back, the final outcome of that hearing was 6-5. 6-5. So everybody relied on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court would hear this case on the religious grounds. On our way to the Supreme Court, what happened in the Ninth Circuit Court was Resolution Copper. Now remember, Rio Tinto, BHP, 2 of the world's biggest giant mining companies, joined the United States. They were granted. So those times we were fighting them at the district court, it was just us in the United States. But now, going to the Supreme Court, they had BHP and Rio Tinto. So now the poor little stronghold is standing here against these guys. So the story I just told you about that lady with her statement moved the country where we had a lot of different denominations join the fight as an amicus brief. So when we went to the Supreme Court, we walked in with our case, but now all the religious groups that have joined to say, this is wrong. This is wrong. So now the Supreme Court, the position they were in was, if they officially denied us publicly, meaning that they all voted, then that means that they got to tell all the Christian people exactly what I just told you. That their words and connections to the earth is not important. You have a Bible. Stay status quo. More than likely, that's what the Lord said. And they couldn't say it. For the stronghold, it is killing our religion forever in the sacred place where deity is lived. So what did the Supreme Court do? 2 said we'll hear, we should hear. 1 has assets to the mines, and the other one's walked away. So if you think about it, we never lost. But we came back to the district court, and the district court here told the Supreme Court, you need to hear this. So when this district court judge here, Arizona, told the Supreme Court, you need to hear it. We thought we were going to get a hearing. Yesterday, we got denied. So our second reappeal was denied yesterday. It took me a lot to get here to be with you guys today. Because right now, I'm in a lot of work right now on the phones with attorneys and everybody across the country. What kind of movement are we going to create? What are we going to do now? The whole country is calling us right now. Because in the religious part, it affects everybody, your religion. And then if they get away with these exemptions, right now, every corporation is waiting for this land transfer. Because when it happens, even the American companies are going to push for their exemptions. To water down the laws that protect the animals, the water, the land. Once this happens, it's a free-for-all until somebody stops it. That's the country you live in. That's the fight that we're in right now. That's why as you sit here in these chairs, it's so critical. You have high school students fighting right now for the land. You have what, junior high kids all over the country fighting, showing up at the Supreme Court. It's amazing to see all these young kids really standing up. So I go home and I tell my own young adults, where are you guys? Don't let these little kids fight for you. Get involved, read. You can write letters, you can talk, you can call. You can say no more. We can create better leaders with morals and integrity who can listen and not just be a corporate person and wanting to have all the wealth, because you're going to pay for that at the end in your religion, in your spirit. That's going to come back. Because the greatest gift that God gave all of us is Mother Earth. Without her, nothing exists. Nothing. So in closing, I just want to say thank you for listening today, because it's really just what word I got yesterday. It's a real critical one for the country. And I'm with you here today. But I will tell you publicly that it's not over. Because what I had said is that if justice is not served, then I don't want to be part of this anymore. And what I told my people last night was that I'm going to Washington, D.C., of course, notifying the whole government. And when I get there, I'm taking off my shoes and I'm putting back on my moccasins. Because if there's any other way I can fight it, it's to be who I am and not be in this box, what America has put all of us in. So I will be notifying the whole country, I'm coming. I'm coming to Washington, D.C., because I don't want to be a part of killing. We should know when we're satisfied. We should know when it's enough is enough. And we should be smarter. And if we're smarter, it's knowing the Mother Earth. Because without her, we can't live. And that's what our religion is based on. It's before the Bible, where the Bible actually comes from, is what we still do. And we were punished for that, because we will not take this corporate way of life and mess everything up. It's just not who we are. So thank you so much for giving me your time and your patience. Thank you.
Question? Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Nosie and Teresa, for coming to the class. I had no idea, I was not aware of the decision from the Supreme Court for not taking up the petition. It was just yesterday. So thank you so much for updating us. I was thinking as you were talking about who we are. And I think that a lot as a settler in Turtle Island, I'm from Pakistan, and I distinctly miss the smell of my land and the river of, the flow of the rivers and the languages. And I think about that of what does it mean to be a settler in the US? And not, because the students, they've done a lot of reading on genocide, on settler colonialism, all of this. But many of them, I guess, even in their questions, what would constitute the ethics of being a good settler? Is there such a thing?
With us, we had to admit we're victims of the past. We couldn't move forward with the fact that we would act like we weren't victims. And for us was to recognize that we're victims, so that healing will come with that pain you have. Now I hear that argument with the Democrats and Republicans when they bring it up that we're settlers. No, that's misguided, because it was a takeover. Mm-hmm. They came and they took and they took and they took and they killed. And so it's like I was saying about the foundation. If you were to tell the truth, then so many people would heal from that, because people will look at the country differently, their attitudes would change differently, And know that, you know, when you're invited into a place, you care for that place as it is yours. When you walk in and you take over somebody's belonging, you will never have that. And that's where we're misguiding our children. Because for us, we're not saying go back. We're not saying go back home. We're saying if you're going to be here, then treat it like home. And so what I see that's missing, and I tell this to Christian people, the very important part of identity to the earth. So what I explained to them is my daughter had a box. She brought me a gold box, wooden box, and there's a feather like this with a blue stone and a white stone. And what I'm sharing with you is something ancient. So he comes to me, her mom, and we open the box. There's a white stone and a blue stone. The white stone is a girl. The blue stone is a boy. So without saying any words, my daughter is showing me that she's pregnant. She's gonna have a baby. So from there, the baby, of course, grows, and then the baby comes, and then the umbilical cord is cut. As soon as the umbilical cord is cut, in our case, with our granddaughter Shayu, so the white stone was given to her. So that reconnects her to the earth, from the mother to the mother. So then the child is raised knowing that the Mother Earth takes care of her. I told the Christian people, I see that missing in this country. It does not give us that reconnection of birth where our roots are at. I said, everybody who's born here on this land, that's their rooted place now. And I said, I feel bad because I don't see it anywhere. It's not a physical action taking place between the Mother Earth and the person. And that's why the Indian people are so strong with the earth, is because that's where we're rooted. But what I found in Europe, there is ceremonies that tie, from every other nationality, they have a similar ceremony, but again, it was taken away. And then especially when it came to America, it was totally non-existent anymore. And so I think, and as I tell a lot of people, all you have to do is go back and visit where your ancestors came from. And a lot of them have. A lot of them have went back and come back. They didn't know they were a Viking. They didn't know they were this. And they brought back a lot of traits of what they were before. And I will tell you, in witnessing, they were a different person as an American. And they realized that that was important. And also, to have somebody native say to them, this is your home. I mean, all those mental things that you think may not be important is important to feel rooted. Other than that, if you don't feel rooted, I mean, again, that's why we have a lot of problems. We see that in our own people, if they don't get rooted.
Well, historically, what would you consider as like settlers? Because I know you mentioned that you don't, Native people don't typically receive like a lot of advocacy from like Asians or Black people, and I just wanted to know who you consider like as a settler, because you're talking about white people going back and visiting their ancestors, but I don't know my ancestors, that's not a thing that I will ever know because it was stolen.
Yeah. So let me explain it like this. So I was in a room filled with a lot of different people. And what I said to them was, there was 4 great gifts that were given the world. In other words, you got something, you got instructions how to take care of it. Well, God gave us instructions to take care of it. So what they say is that the people that are complected like me, we have the responsibility to take care of the earth. And then the people who are your complexion have the responsibility of rain and water. And then the people who are like Asians, they have the responsibility of wind. And then the people who are really white complected have the responsibility of fire. So we lost a lot of that, because that's how you take care of the earth. But what they said was that there would be those who abuse what they have against one another. But there'll be a time that the people have to come back, and whoever has what water we have left in our, say, bucket, we have to pour it in everybody else's bucket to bring that way back of life back together. So when I was in North Carolina, I spoke with Reverend Barber, Reverend Mendez, Reverend Wright, and we had a house full of African Americans. And after I spoke, when we came out of the back, because we had to go to another church, several young men came running up, and all the preachers were like, hey. Anyway, they came up and they said, no, we want to talk to him. And what they said to me was, they never heard that before. They never heard that they had prayers with water. And that's what I told him in Trenton. I said, you do. I said, because that was spoken in the very beginning of when creation was. So all you have to do is go back to the water and put your hand in the water. Because all that would rekindle because you have it already. It's just this colonized way is taking that away from us. I said, so if you look at like all the four I talked about, we all have ties to it, but nobody never talks about it, you know? And so anyway, I tell them, if you never get the chance to go back, just go to the water. Because you have that gift. And I tell white people the same thing. I said, you don't even know why you probably like candles in the church. That was your gift to take care and control that. And that's why the Indian people, we still take care of what's important with the earth and everything that lives on it. So anyway, the only thing I can say to you, if you ever have an opportunity, if you ever find where your descendants are from, it'd be good just to make a trip and to see what it's like. Because then that comes back, you're more enriched because now you can apply that. And it's the same way with me. If I went to Europe, it'd be the same thing. That I need to know the basics. Then when I come back, I know what to do. And believe me, my wife is a witness. So many people have went back and so many people have changed. They didn't know, and they felt back part about what they should do. But anyway, I would just say, like right now, I tell people, go to the water, pray to the fire. I'm not saying they're God. They're instruments. They're medicine that connects you. Then you start dreaming. You start seeing things. You start feeling it. But if you never do that, then it's hard to connect. Yeah. So just do that.
I relate to your discussion of deconstructing your own deconstructing one's own beliefs that they grew up with and having to find their own identity from within. What is your advice to people who have to go through that process?
To have to go through that process?
Mm-hmm. Discovery and then finding out their identity from there.
Well, for somebody to have to do it, especially in an older age, the thing is that you have it already, and all I have to say is that things start to come. We in English, I guess you would call it the volume. You turn off the volume. But when you start to do that, you begin to turn up the volume and you start seeing things. Because again, the trees, the animals can talk to you, but that means that being patient and listening. And then at night when you dream, that's when the transition of their words translates into what they were trying to tell you. Then you begin to see the world more, you begin to listen. I had a friend who went to Vietnam. He was he passed away. He was 21 years older than me. So he asked me, what's a native? Because I was scared of Native people are real strong in prayers and stuff. But anyway, one day he talked to me about being in Vietnam. And he was one of those who went down the hole, thought, didn't know if he was going to come back alive and so forth. But he talked about what he could smell, what he could hear, and how he could listen, but he couldn't see because it was too dark. So how he prayed and how a lot of these things kind of guided him out. So anyway, I told him, I said, you finally touched your spirit. If that's what it is, that's what I mean when we shut those things off. Because you can actually see and hear. You actually can know where you're at without even seeing. But I said that's the strong spirituality that people have that we just kind of lost it.
Sorry, Dr. Nosie, actually people are just leaving because class time is over. But please talk to our esteemed elder. Thank you all for your questions.